Harry and I are on the 28,000-kilometer Trans-Canada Trail. It's the longest recreational trail in the world. Today's episode is in Saskatchewan. In August 2024, we hiked and cycled a section of the trail, starting from the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. If you're not familiar with Canadian geography, Manitoba and Saskatchewan are two of the three prairie provinces in Western Canada, with Alberta being the third. Saskatchewan stands out as the sunniest province in the country. Because it's far from any major body of water, droughts can hit hard. It's also one of the most tornado-prone regions in Canada, averaging 12 to 18 twisters a year, some of them quite powerful. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps support our channel and keeps us motivated to share more of our adventures. Our journey in Saskatchewan began in Duck Mountain Provincial Park, right on Highway 57 at the provincial border. We're about 330 kilometers, or roughly 205 miles north of the U.S. border. First 21 kilometers of our journey is known as the Duck Mountain Provincial Park Trail. If you picture Saskatchewan as flat prairie land, this area will surprise you. Now, I don't want you to get too excited, but my favorite moment on this trail is coming up at the end, when I stumbled upon 3 adult moose traveling together. It felt like witnessing a grand procession of noble beasts from a medieval tapestry, or as if they had stepped out of an ancient wilderness legend. So stay tuned for that footage, you won't want to miss it. Now, a couple of kilometers into the hike, we passed a campground in the provincial park. Right from the start, I noticed that the Trans-Canada Trail signs here are different. They're much smaller than what we've seen in most of Canada. Some were almost completely obscured by vegetation, which made navigation a little tricky. Our journey took us along the southern shore of Madge Lake in Duck Mountain Park. Spanning 21 square kilometers, the lake has long drawn travelers, offering respite to generations of bathers and wanderers. Over 300 cottages now line its shores, alongside a large campground and 2 public beaches, Winnie Stick and Pickerel Point, both softened with imported sand. I was surprised to see a floating bouncy castle system on the lake. Certainly not what I expected in the heart of Saskatchewan. But this is a land of contrasts. Known for its endless sunshine and cycles of drought, Saskatchewan's lakes and rivers are the ghostly remnants of an ancient ice-bound world. What looks like a sun-drenched prairie today was once buried under towering glaciers, with meltwater carving out the landscape we see now. There were plenty of bugs, but thankfully they weren't biting. And then we had our first real wildlife encounter, a lone coyote trotting across the road in front of us. This little guy couldn't have been more than 15 pounds, but with the tall grass nearby, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a whole pack hidden just out of sight. If you're hiking here, or with a dog, especially off-leash, it's something to be mindful of. We're officially leaving the Duck Mountain Park Trail behind and rolling onto the 56-kilometer stretch known as the Regional Municipalities of Cote and Sliding Hills Connector. Not that there's a big "Welcome to the next trail" banner. Like most of the Trans-Canada Trail, one section simply blends into the next, leaving you to figure it out based on subtle clues like a change in scenery or the sudden realization that your map and GPS have moved on. This section is a mixed bag of surfaces, some pavement, plenty of gravel, and the occasional overgrown lane where your best bet is to embrace the damp and hope your waterproof footwear is doing its job. It's also where we begin to leave the dense forest behind and transition into classic rolling farmland, where the trees thin out and fields start stretching toward the horizon. Navigation here requires a bit of creativity. Some of these roads have yet to be formally introduced to my Trans-Canada Trail map, and my GPS seems to have its own naming conventions that don't quite match anything on the ground. With no trail signs to help sometimes, I'm left navigating by the landmarks that actually exist: water bodies, power lines, railway tracks, whatever I can see that aligns with the squiggles on my screen. Services are sparse along this stretch. In Cote, we do spot a bench near a trail sign, though getting to it requires a short trek through tall grass. Turns out the bench is slowly being reclaimed by the wild, but it's there if you really need a break. For a while, the trail runs parallel to train tracks, which adds a touch of nostalgia. There's something about the rhythmic clatter of a distant train that just fits with a long-distance trek. Eventually, we follow alongside Highway 8 for a bit before the route veers near Kamsack. It's a decent-sized town by Saskatchewan standards, population 2,000, with a grocery store and a hotel. But since we don't have footage of it, we'll leave it at that. After Kamsack, a rustic bridge carries us over the Assiniboine River, marking another shift in the landscape. From here to Vergen, the land stretches out, and suddenly the skies take center stage. We had heard about Saskatchewan's living skies, and now we get to experience them in full force. Clouds move, morph, and pile up in ever-changing patterns. Sometimes a gentle ripple, sometimes a dramatic swirl of stormy energy. This is trail number 3, the Village of Vergen Trail. It's a 2.8 kilometer side trail, which is 1.7 miles, that leads into the town of Vergen before returning to the main route. The trail follows gravel roads and brings you to a National Historic Site, the National Doukhobor Heritage Village. The Doukhobors were a group of pacifist settlers who fled persecution in Russia in the late 1800s. Many made their home here in Saskatchewan, building a community based on shared work and simple living. We won't show the residential areas out of respect for privacy, but you'll see the grain elevator and where the trail crosses through town. We've moved on to trail number 4, the Kenora to Vergen Connection, which is 32 kilometers or 20 miles long. Dusty roads stretched out like a grain elevator's shadow at sunset, long, unwavering, and in no hurry to end. We pressed forward past golden fields, marveling at the simplicity of it all. No obstacles, no storms, only the whisper of tires on gravel and the patient passage of time. Some days, the adventure isn't in what happens, but in the simple act of moving forward. Trail number 5 runs 3.5 kilometers, or about 2 miles, through the town of Kenora, giving us a chance to stretch our legs and take in a bit of history. In 1897, 180 families from western Ukraine settled here, forming one of Saskatchewan's first Ukrainian communities. Kenora itself grew around the railway. Tracks were laid in 1904, and by 1905, the settlement around the station became a hamlet. That station still stands today as a museum and visitor center. As we walked, we appreciated the town's tidy streets and the rare patches of shade along the path. A quiet interlude before heading back to the wilderness. We began our journey on the trail number 6, the Good Spirit Lake Trail, stretching 37.5 kilometers or 23 miles through both open areas and woodlands. Far ahead, on the long straight path, something moved. A lone traveler, stray livestock, or something else entirely. Harry and I approached talking, so whatever it was might not feel threatened, it might give us space. Peered into the undergrowth where the shape had vanished, and there it was, a large moose, standing silent and watchful, its dark eyes regarding me as if weighing my presence. I scarcely had time to marvel before it turned and trotted deeper into the marsh. Then another, second moose stepped into view, following the first. And just as I thought the moment had passed, a third jogged in from my right, completing their number. 3 moose now stood looking at us as we looked at them. Then, as if by some unspoken signal, they turned away, high-stepping through the tall grass, further across the marsh, their footfalls fading into the wind. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much to our subscribers. Our channel is growing, and we hope you will consider hitting the subscribe button if you're new to our channel. It doesn't cost anything, but means the world to us. And we hope to see you again very soon.